Hey y'all.
Hey.
Happy Friday.
Friday Love Fest.
Friday Love Fest. Okay, so this is part 5, which also means May is over.
May's a long one.
Right. Of our abusive behavior series. And so we just wanted to sort of like wrap up and talk about lots of different things that we say or do that we kind of like call something other than abuse.
We blur the edges, or we avoid calling a spade, which is like one of my favorite things to do. Let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
It's often bold. It is a thing that changes perspective quickly and abruptly. And when we dance around these things, these topics, and we don't call them what they are, I think that we it's lacking courage, and it gets us off the hook from being accountable, which requires courage and vulnerability. And so if we are advocates of practicing vulnerability and finding courage and nurturing courage, so one of the best ways to do that is to call things what they are when we discover what exactly they are.
Right.
Like abuse.
Right. So like one of the examples that I was telling Rachel about, and some of the work that I've done with domestic violence awareness, there was a case once where a young lady said that her boyfriend choked her. And so eventually went to court. His lawyer was able to get him off for that charge because choking is actually one of those words we use to sort of discount what actually happened. Choking is an individual action. You choke on food or water or something. Strangling, which sounds like
ugly,
really ugly, and is therefore fitting
to the action,
is actually what happened. He strangled her. He didn't choke her. He couldn't have choked her. So he strangles her, that's what she should have said.
Right.
And he was able to get off because he didn't choke her.
Yeah. Ooh, that's messed up.
We have to call things what they are. And the reality is abuse is harsh. Abuse is a real thing that we don't want to, we don't want to call it.
And we only want to call it that when we're like talking about you got to get rid of him, he's an abuser. And we're really good at using it when hands have been placed on people, right? And sometimes we probably don't even do that, but we're better at that, right? But
we say all
kinds of
We say, he
put his hands on
her. No, he abused her physically.
But we also verbally abuse people, emotionally abuse people, and we do it all the time in all of our relationships.
Yeah.
And we don't call it that.
Right.
And so we've been for the last 4 weeks talking about abusive behaviors that you do, I do, she's done. And we're not calling them that, and we're trying to get you to start calling them that because it will jolt you into a behavioral shift, because nobody wants to be an abuser.
Right.
Not nobody.
There are people who do.
There are people that do. But our audience, the people that are listening to this, you don't want to be an abuser.
Right.
You want to make a change.
Yeah.
But you'll only make a change if we call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
The other place I think we see this like softening of language, or this retelling of stories, is in the world of assault, especially sexual assault.
Yeah.
So I heard a story about a young boy who, him and his friends, they're like 12, he like smacked this girl on the butt in school, kind of as a revenge thing. And he got in trouble, and I listened to the story be told, and the principal, the parent, and the listeners to this story were all like, oh yeah, they smacked her on the butt and they got in trouble because, it's inappropriate, or he shouldn't have done that. And I'm like, no, it's maybe not the first. I said that when I told the story, but it's one of the first times this young woman's been sexually assaulted.
Right.
And we should call it that. That young boy sexually assaulted that girl. That is not his to touch, not in that way, not without consent, and that's true of a 12-year-old or a 25-year-old or a 92-year-old.
Yeah.
And instead, we use all this soft language because they're just children.
Inappropriate, right.
It's not inappropriate
That's
touching,
assault.
it's assault.
Right.
And I think when you start to say things like that, even to a 12-year-old, and you say, that's sexual assault, they start to take their behaviors far more seriously.
Right.
I bet you he won't sexually assault anybody anymore if that's what it's called, and there's criminal action that can be taken against those things.
He's an abuser now.
Yeah.
If you are name calling, that's verbal abuse. If you stand in front of the door during an argument and try to keep someone from leaving, that's physical abuse.
It is.
If you threaten someone, that's physical abuse.
Yeah.
That, we don't want to call it what it is, but I think, and I've had a lot of people ask, when they have friends who are in abusive relationships, well, what can I do? How can I, support this person? They don't realize. And I'm like, well, one of the things you can do is always call abuse abuse. Always call it what it is. Never downplay what this person is doing to your, friend or loved one or whatever.
Because then we get into that justifying abusive behavior, which we talked about in one of the videos.
A couple weeks
and we
ago.
don't want to do that because as soon as we start justifying it, it lessens its impact. And the truth is, its impact is an impact that's leading toward more abuse.
Right.
If we don't nip it in the bud, if we don't call it what it is, then we have more of a risk of it escalating and becoming more and more dangerous.
Right, absolutely. I think that we sometimes, because we love the person, oftentimes we love the person who is being abusive. And again, we have all exhibited abusive behavior. So that's entirely possible that that's the case. But because we love that person, we downplay what they've done. We downplay the impact. We downplay our feelings about it. And if you've been abused, that's traumatic. So we need to be impeccable about describing what actually happened. That was a traumatic experience because it was abusive.
And we can be realistic. We want to be realistic. Just because somebody's abused you doesn't mean they're always going to abuse you, right? But if we don't say it that way, if we don't identify it, then we're going to let it perpetuate, right? And we want to call it what it is so we can shift the behavior. And if they're not willing to shift the behavior, well then now we've got to make some informed choices about maybe not being with that person because maybe they are an abuser, right?
And I think it's helpful too, to your point, to bring up when it happens, if it's you that it's happening to say this is abuse, because it just may be the case that person doesn't realize that that's what that is. So instead of saying, well, you really hurt my feelings when you kind of like isolated me from the group.
Yeah.
Actually, that was really emotionally abusive to me. To say it differently, that was actually really emotionally abusive. I don't know if you realize.
Yeah, it's controlling.
That was really controlling, and that's an abusive behavior. That's an emotionally abusive behavior.
And the other flip of this is when you realize you're being an abuser, right? When you realize when your behavior is abusive, to be able to say to somebody, look, that's my bad. That was abusive, and I don't want to treat you that way.
Yeah.
And here are the things I'm going to do differently.
And to question, which I think we've talked about earlier this month, to question, one, why am I inclined to be abusive right now? What is making me think that this is either justified or okay, or just what is motivating me to try to control this person?
Yeah.
Do I feel like I don't have enough control?
Yeah. I mean, typically, at the end of the day, you're going to find out that some part of you feels insecure, inadequate in the relationship or in your life.
Yeah.
And that's a root cause that you'd want to work on so you could avoid future abusive behavior.
Right.
It's typically, we create our own things. So it's typically something inside of you that would encourage or promote that kind of behavior towards somebody else.
Yeah. If you feel powerless, then you usually try to go and exert power over someone else.
Make somebody else feel powerless.
Right. So we hope this is helpful, you guys. All month we've been talking about different behaviors that we commonly dismiss as something other than what they are, which is abusive.
Yeah.
So disengage.
Yeah.
We teach love, y'all.